The sailor has been told to keep the last knot tied. The cord is short enough to fit in his palm, rough against the skin, and easy to tuck inside a coat or a sea chest. It might lie beside a knife, a pipe, a spare button, and all the other small things a man carries, because the sea has a way of making ordinary objects feel very important. 3 knots have been pulled tight in it by someone said to know the wind. The first knot is for a fair breeze. That's the one the sailor wants when the ship has been sitting too long, the sails hanging loose while everyone on board pretends patience is still a virtue. The second knot is for a stronger wind, the kind asked for when delay has started costing you money or food and getting on your nerves. The third knot belongs to rough weather, and the old warning says a sensible man knows to keep his hands off of it until he absolutely needs it. That warning is part of the charm. The cord gives help, but it also gives a rule. A little wind can save a voyage. Too much wind can tear a canvas, or snap a rope, or break a mast, or push a ship towards rocks before anyone has time to pray about it. A sailor who buys wind also buys the burden of knowing when to stop asking for it. You can picture him checking the cord before he leaves shore. He knows the story attached to it. Maybe he knows who tied it, or maybe he only knows who sold it to him. Either way, the instruction is plain. Open the first if you need it, open the second if you must, and leave the last one tied unless the sea has left you no better choice. That little cord carries the old idea at the heart of weather magic. The ship has to move, and the wind hasn't shown up. The field needs rain, and the clouds keep passing by. The thunder gets close enough to shake the door, and someone reaches for a bell or a candle or a prayer or a charm. Weather was large, useful, dangerous, and difficult to answer to, so folklore filled the sky with people who knew how to ask it for help. And when help was possible, harm was possible too. The person who could call wind might also be feared for sending a storm. The charmer who brought rain could be blamed when hail beat the ground. The weather worker stood close to need, and need has always had a nervous memory. I'm Papa G, and this is the Feral Folklorist, and tonight we're talking about working the weather, witches who called the storm. The old belief that witches and charmers and sailors and rainmakers and weather workers could call wind, raise storms, turn hail, and bargain with the sky. Long before weather magic entered witch trials and demonology books, a churchman in Lyons was already trying to talk people out of believing in storm makers. His name was Agobard of Lyons. In the 9th century, he wrote a short work, usually called On Hail and Thunder, and he wrote like a man who had heard the same dangerous rumor one time too many. People around him believed that certain men could raise storms or bring hail or work the weather through charms or spoken words. These weather workers were called tempestari, or storm makers, and Agobard wanted Christians to stop treating them like people who had power over the sky. Agobard gives us one of the older doorways into this subject matter, because in his world, the fear was centered on hail and thunder, because both could arrive quickly and leave damage behind. The hail could cut through vines or beat down grain, maybe break fruit trees, or ruin an entire season in the time it took people to run for shelter. Now, thunder came with lightning, so there could be fire or sudden death, and the feeling that heaven itself had opened up in anger. Once people called a storm a raised storm, they heard it differently. A storm that arrived from the west was weather. A storm raised by a worker had a hand behind it. Somebody may have spoken the charm, made the bargain, taken payment, or wished harm into a field. That change in language gave the damage a possible author, and once a disaster has an author, grief can turn very quickly into blame. Agobard also gives us the strangest pieces of medieval weather belief. Magonia. According to the belief he describes, Magonia was a place in the clouds where ships sailed through the air. Those cloud ships were said to carry away crops damaged by hail and storms, and the storm makers on the ground were believed to help with the trade. The sky sailors were imagined paying those workers for the ruined grain and fruit. It's a strange picture, but it's a very human one. A field is ruined, so the food is gone, and the village starts asking where it went. That's the hard country logic under this story. A family goes out after a storm and sees the vines stripped and the grain flattened, or the orchard bruised, and all the work of months lying in the mud. The food was expected, counted on, it was planned around, but suddenly it's gone. Magonia gave the loss a set of actors, ships overhead, weather workers nearby, and a hidden market made out of somebody else's harvest. It turned blind weather into something people could picture. Agobard tells another story that shows how fast that picture could become dangerous. He says 4 people were brought before a crowd in chains because the crowd believed they had fallen from the cloud ships of Magonia. There were 3 men and 1 woman, and the people holding them were sky sailors. Agobard says he intervened before the crowd stoned them. It's hard to know whether every detail happened exactly the way he tells it, but the chains are the part to remember. This belief could move from talk to violence very quickly. His answer was church teaching. Agobard argued that God ruled rain, hail, snow, thunder, and wind, and he wanted people to stop paying storm makers for protection or blaming them for the damage. That tells us the belief was more than a story told for entertainment. People were worried about raised weather. They were thinking about crop loss through a mix of religion, rumor, and folk practice. They were also willing to treat strangers or neighbors as part of the weather problem. The older world around that fear was full of weather signs. People watched the direction of the wind, the color of the sky, the behavior of birds and animals, and the smell before rain, and the way the clouds gathered over hills and water. A farmer knew which clouds threatened hail. A sailor knew which one was useful and which one could make him trouble. A priest knew prayers for rain, and a charmer might know words against lightning. Ordinary skill and church ritual and magical reputation could stand very close together in these times, and that closeness made the weather worker hard to place. The same person might be useful in one season and suspicious in the next. If they warned people to bring animals in before a storm, that could look like wisdom. Now, if they predicted hail too well, somebody might wonder whether they had read the clouds or helped call them. A reputation for charms and healing or second sight or weather signs could become a blessing when help was needed, but a danger when the crops failed. Weather belief also gathered around the places where people met the sky. Fields mattered because crops stood open to hail and frost and heat and rain. Shores mattered because boats were left exposed under the wind that no one could control. Church bell towers matter because bells and prayers were used against storms. And wells mattered because water rising from the ground already belonged to blessing and healing and hidden forces. Doorways, they matter too because the house itself needs protection from lightning and fire and storms. So weather magic was never one neat practice. It was a cluster of prayers and charms and warnings and fears and bargains and accusations. Some people wanted rain, some wanted wind. Some wanted hail turned away from the fields. Some wanted lightning kept from the church roof or the house beams. When the weather came badly, people wanted to know whether trouble had arrived by chance or if it had been helped along a little bit by someone. Agobard matters because he shows how this old pattern was. By the 9th century, people were already talking about raising storms and storm makers and hail damage and cloud ships, and the strangers they blamed for what came out of the sky. Later witch trials gave that fear a harder legal edge, but they didn't invent the fear from nothing. Before anyone was talking about courtrooms with witches and being burned at the stake or hung at the edge of the village, you already had a village looking at a ruined field or a house that was struck by lightning and burned, and they were asking the questions, did this happen naturally or did someone cause it? Wind selling shows weather magic while there's still time to ask for help. Now, a sailor bought a cord before the voyage, while the ship was still whole and the mast was still standing. He bought it because the sea could have left him sitting still, and a still ship could become expensive, and you could become hungry, and a little dangerous in its own way. The cord gave him something that was prepared ahead of time in case he needed it. That's practical magic. It works best before fear has everybody making really bad decisions. Now, in Cornwall and Devon, witches were said to sell wind to sailors by tying it into rope. The Museum of Witchcraft and Magic at Boscastle has a white rope with 3 knots in its collection, listed under sea witchcraft and described as a rope used for selling the wind. That object keeps the practice close to the hands. The weather worker ties the cord, the sailor carries it, and the knots stay close until the voyage needs some help. The order of the knots gives the working its rules. A sailor would loosen the cord by degrees because weather called all at once could turn on the person asking for its help. The first release brought useful wind, and the next brought a stronger wind, and the last knot belonged to really hard weather, the kind that could help a really desperate ship that was put in really great danger. The charm gave him access to the wind, and it also made the sailor responsible for just how much he was willing to do to control the weather. The Isle of Man gives the practice another shape. Some wind working there was connected with wells. In one account, witches were said to raise wind from a well and put it under 3 knots of thread for sailors to loosen when they needed it. A well might seem like a strange place to seek wind, but wells have always belonged to serious folk magic. People went to them for healing and blessing and wishing and even saint work. A well reached down into hidden water, and folk magic knows how to use places where people already go for help to begin with. The Isle of Man also gives us Elizabeth Black. In 1658, she was accused of emptying a springing well to obtain a favorable wind. She denied the charge, but witnesses said the well had been emptied, and she was fined for conduct tied to charming, witchcraft, or sorcery. That case sits in the uncomfortable space between custom and accusation. A local act done for weather could be useful to one person and punishable to another. In St. Kilda, they give us a different version of the same story. Fishermen there were said to visit a well where the wind was wrong for fishing, Each man stood astride it for a moment, expecting the wind to change. In that version, the practice belongs to the people whose work depended on the weather turning. They knew the place, the action, and the moment when the wind had to be answered. Now, across these stories, weather work depends on place, timing, the objects, and a little restraint. The shore matters because the boats leave from it, and the well matters because it's a local place of power. The cord, we're going to go back to the cord now. It matters because it carries the work away from the person who tied it. And the knots, they matter because they make the work gradual. Weather is approached through the right object in the right place at the right time and by someone who knows all the proper magical rules. Northern Europe carried a strong reputation for wind magic, especially in stories written by outsiders. Olaus Magnus, the 16th century Swedish writer, included the famous image of a northern weather magician selling a rope with 3 wind knots to sailors. We have lots of knots being sold to sailors here. And the scene is easy to understand before anyone even explains it, because, like we said, a ship needs movement. So a weather worker offers wind in the form the captain can actually carry with him. The danger, though, sits behind the gift because the wrong amount of wind can wreck the same ship it was meant to help. So still, the image of the wind seller lasted because it made sense around the sea. Anyone who lived by sail understood wind as a blessing, a delay, a danger, and maybe a death. The knot works because it already made sense before the magic touched it. A knot holds a sail, secures cargo, closes a bundle up. It keeps something from slipping loose at the wrong moment. So, tying knots were already done a lot on a ship to keep things closed or to keep them secure, to keep them in place. Folk magic takes that ordinary action and gives it a purpose. To tie is to hold. To loosen is to release. Rope was already part of the sailor's work, and the charm spoke in a language that he understood. The wells work in a similar way. They were already places people visited out of basic need for water. And you would go there if you were a sick person or a traveler or someone wanting a blessing. They would approach the well water because it came from the ground, from the earth, and brought something old to it. So whatever they were asking for felt like it would be answered. So the danger really sits in the handling of this magic, because a person asks for wind because their voyage needs a little movement. A fisherman asks for the weather to turn because his day's work depends on it. And a weather worker may be valued while the charm helps people, but they're feared when the sky turns rough. So the magical rules for these practices is pretty plain, because weather is something that can get out of control really quickly. So you want to have restraint. You want to only untie that knot just a little bit to see the direction it takes you. Because if you begin untying all the knots at once, you just don't know where the weather's going to go. Weather magic became most dangerous when it moved from being a charm into someone's hand as evidence in front of a judge. So a sailor could carry that wind cord without involving the whole village in his business. A fisherman could visit a well, do his little bit of praying or magic, and then go back to his boats. But a hailstorm was something different. Hail left bruised fruit and flattened grains and shredded vines, and neighbors demanding to know why one field had been hit and another hadn't. And if a storm threatened the crops of the king, then it wanted an immediate answer. The courts wanted to know the cause of it, and usually demonologists gave them one. By the late 15th century, the Malleus Maleficarum, usually translated as the hammer of the witches, has given weather fear a larger legal shape. The book includes a chapter on witches raising hailstorms, tempests, and lightning, and in that chapter, destructive weather is given a devil, a witch, a name place, a method, a victim, and a punishment. A storm could be treated like a crime scene. One case in the Malleus describes a violent hailstorm in the Diocese of Constance. The storm was said to have destroyed the fruit and the crops, and the vineyards across a strip of land about a mile wide. People demanded an inquiry, and after formal deliberation, the matter was treated as witchcraft. Among the suspects were two women, Agnes, a Bath woman, and Anna von Mindelheim. They were held in separate prisons and questioned about the storm. The account gives the kind of small details that made an accusation feel pretty solid. One woman was said to have carried a little water to a field called Couple. She pointed out the tree where she said the devil stood. She described digging a hole, pouring the water into it, stirring it with her finger, and calling on demons. Then, according to the confession, the water rose into the air before the hailstorm came. On the third day, the two women were burned. The record of that incident says something because confessions made under pressure tell us very little about what actually happened in that field. But they do tell us a great deal about what officials expected weather magic to look like. They wanted a substance, a gesture, a place where this happened, a devil to blame, and the person who caused it. So a little bit of water, a tree, a hole in the ground, and a storm were enough to build a death sentence. Now, the fear became even more public in Scotland in 1590. King James VI had married Anne of Denmark, and the royal voyages were battered by dangerous weather. In the fear that followed, storm magic became part of the North Berwick witch panic. The accusation said witches had tried to kill the king and queen by raising storms against their ships. A weather crime had suddenly become treason. Gallus Duncan was one of the first people pulled into that panic. Now, if you're a fan of Outlander, you may have seen this character in the television series. However, she was based on a real person. Gallus had a reputation for healing, and her employer became suspicious when she went out at night and seemed to help sick people in ways he couldn't explain. Sounds like a big crime, doesn't it, helping people? So, of course, she was tortured, searched for witches' marks, and made to name others. And once that began, the names kept spreading. Agnes Sampson became one of the best-known names in the case. She was called the Wise Wife of Keith, and people knew her for healing, childbirth help, animal healing, storm prediction, and protection against harmful magic. That kind of reputation could bring clients from a wide area. And under royal fear, it also brought her before King James. The pamphlet News from Scotland gave the North Berwick panic a life beyond the trial. It told readers about witches meeting at North Berwick Kirk, the devil giving instructions, and a dead cat thrown into the sea as part of a charm to raise a storm against the king's ship. King James took the matter personally. He questioned accused people and studied witchcraft and later published Demonology in 1597. Once a king believed witches had reached for him through the weather, storm magic became more than just village fear. It became a threat to the crown, the church, and the order of the country. Weather magic left behind many records, books, and pamphlets, accusations and executions, and the idea that bad weather could have a guilty human hand behind it. The old charm might stay beside a well or a sailor's pocket. The accusations went into books and courtrooms and into people's memory. So weather workers were remembered because people needed help from the sky and because people wanted someone to blame when the sky raged against them. The rule for weather work is very plain and still has a place today, and it starts with common sense. If rough weather is coming, bring the animals inside if you have them. Move around chairs or signs or pots or anything the wind can throw around. You charge your phone. You know where the flashlight is. If there's thunder, get indoors and stay away from the windows before lightning comes with it. Good weather's work doesn't replace safety. It helps you remember these things. So for a modern house, I would make this a storm keeping practice. It's a type of spell that uses things that already belong to weather folklore. Living house leek. Now, house leek is the plant you would call hens and chickens, which is a type of succulent, and it uses a bell, a stormlight, Thor's beard, juniper's beard, thunder beard, they're all called. They were kept on roofs and near houses, protection against lightning, fires, and storms. And bells were rung against storms for warning and protection to tell someone else that a storm was coming. In Polish folk tradition, the gromnica, or thunder candle, was brought out during storms for protection against lightning and the danger it would bring. So what you're going to need to do this little bit of a ritual is a potted house leek, which we call hens and chickens here in the South, or some other sort of hardy succulent that is in a rosette pattern. That's what you're wanting. Then you'll need a small bell. It could be a dinner bell or one you use on your altar already. A storm candle in a heavy holder. And some people say, what is a storm candle? You can use an emergency candle or taper candle and put it in some sort of holder. Some people might use even a battery operated candle. You need a charged phone, a flashlight, or a weather radio. Set the plant by the front door, or the back porch, or the back door, or another place where the outside world meets the house. A pot by the door is the same modern version of planting house leek on the roof because nobody needs to fall off a ladder in the name of folklore. So we're just going to put it by the door or the doorway. You keep the bell, the stormlight, and flashlight, or your weather radio, whichever you're going to use, together in one safe place inside the house. And when the weather starts turning, do the practical work first. Check the forecast. Bring people and animals in. You clear the porch. Keep your shoes nearby if you need to get to shelter. The magic can wait until everyone is safe. And when the house is ready, ring the bell once. Let the sound mark the house as awake and paying attention. Then light the candle or turn on your battery operated candle. Stand near the storm and say, "This house is named. This house is held. Weather pass over, weather pass by, weather pass with no harm." You're actually talking to the storm and saying, this house doesn't interest you. There's nothing going on here. So keep going. Then stop working and start listening. You check for alerts, keep your flashlight where you can reach it, and if you need shelter, get to a shelter. A storm practice should steady the house and the people inside it. It shouldn't turn anyone into a fool arguing with the thunder through a window. The point is to stay calm. And after the storm is passed and it's safe to go outside, check the plant, check the porch, check the doors, and any trees close to the house. Snuff the candle out or turn off the light. Ring the bell once more and say, "The storm has passed, the house is steady." So if in the process of the storm, the plant, the hens and chickens, gets a little broken, just trim it up a little bit and give it some plant love, maybe a little bit of compost, and set it back by the door. In other words, don't turn every broken leaf into some sort of big prophecy. So once again, weather magic is about being prepared for the weather before it arrives. That's why we're talking about the modern things of your flashlight and your candles and keeping things all in one place where you can get to them easily. Weather magic was about being prepared ahead of time. And that's what we're going to do whenever storms begin to come. That's why we watch the weather forecast. That's why we close the doors that need to be closed, or we get the dog inside before it starts raining. So one of the most important things about weather magic is respect and restraint. Don't call upon storms just to see if you can do it, just to see if the sky will answer you. Because any good witch knows that playing with magic just for the sake of playing with it can bring you trouble. I'm Papa G, and this has been the Feral Folklorist, and this is the end of Season 2 of the podcast. We're taking a very short break after this, but Season 3 will be back in August. We've got more old folklore coming, hauntings and strange superstitions, stories of witchcraft, trips to the graveyard, and all the things in history that can send a chill up your spine. So until next time, keep that last knot tied on that cord. Keep your storm candle where you can find it. And when thunder starts over the roof, get inside. If you'd like to hear the After the Show episode where I go deeper into the folklore, spill a little extra dirt, and sometimes rant just a bit, consider becoming a patron over on my Patreon at patreon.com/PapaG. You can find the official site for the podcast at feralfolklorist.com. And if you need spell supplies for any of the workings we talk about on the show, our metaphysical shop, Aromages Botanica, has been weaving magic for over 25 years. That's over at aromages.com.